Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. John and I would like to welcome you all to Kilcoolies, to Ballybunion and to the 4th Annual Women in Media Weekend.
It's going to be a very big challenge to see if this generation of women editors, managers and leaders can bring Irish journalism through the hugely challenging territory that lies ahead. It's probably a tougher test than anything that has gone before for the non-Ahéireann in the media. Thank you.
Encouraging and supportive, especially of a young journalist starting out. And he was particularly influential in my life in one way that you didn't know at the time, in that when I went to him one time and I had this idea that I wanted to go and work in the north of Ireland, and I wanted to cover some stories that were not related to the Troubles, because I kind of thought, well, there's lots of stuff going on up there, but we only hear about all that stuff, which is obviously very important. And he could have looked at me and told me to get lost, but he didn't. He said he thought that was a good idea, and off I went up to the north, and as a result I met my boyfriend and have 2 children who came from all that. So if it wasn't for Conor Brady, I don't know, I'd have a very different life.
It's 15% of people decided their first preference on polling day or the day before polling day. So that's quite a staggering number, 15%. And the next slide shows us that 20% of people decided on their first preference in the last week of the campaign. So taken together, that's quite a huge chunk of the electorate.
Politically, in the last election, we saw that there was an increase of over 40% women TDs. We now have 35 TDs in the Dáil, but still quite a small number.
Thank you very much, Mary. And indeed, I had the privilege of knowing and being very friendly with Mary Cummins. She was great fun, but she was also a woman who kind of followed the spirit of feel the fear and do it. And I have to say that's always been my own approach to politics.
I mentioned earlier that RTE gave me a breakdown of their gender stats, which Kevin Backers presented at an October meeting of Women on Air. And he said, just for RTE as a whole, the total workforce is 48% female and 52% male, which is pretty good. Management grades not quite as good, but not too bad. 43% are women. There are 2 women on the RTE executive out of 8, and there is a woman chair, Moya Doherty, and 50% of the board are female. 49% of on-air presenters are women, which is a very good stat. And the best point, in RTE News and Current Affairs, 51% of staff are female, although 44% are managers, including the head of television news, the foreign news editor, the political assignments editor, and the editor of Clareburn Live. 10 of the 26 RTE correspondents are women, and 3 of the 5 political correspondents. So RTE is doing very well.
Here's a TD for Cork North West, and can I just say that politics, whether you're male or female, is an unbelievable experience. Good and bad, challenging, rewarding. It puts you on the edge on so many different levels. But I have to say, looking back on it, and I'm still processing the aftermath, but what I would say is that it is just, it was just an absolute privilege to be a member of Dáil Éireann and to represent the people of Cork North West.
And also, the fact that we all know that politics is a very male-dominated domain, and the percentage of media as well very much male-dominated. So, and also the people feeding into the media often would have vested interests with regard to how a campaign was going. I felt that local radio was often easier to get your viewpoint across. You'd have more space to give your views in a debate, and often easier than the local papers.
But the challenges, I think, are smaller. Like when I was presenting Primetime, I haven't said this before, on Thursday night, that afternoon we were doing a whole special on government formation. This is just, what day is today? 2 days ago. But that afternoon, my lovely press officer, Laura Fitzgerald, walked into me in my office, and I share my office with another great Kerry woman, Katie Hannon, who's our political correspondent. Everyone says if you want to know what's happening in RT, go into Katie and Miriam's office. We are the hub of all information. But anyway, she sat down, Laura, she's lovely, she said, Miriam, there's an FOI in on how much your hair and your clothes cost in prime time. No, but it's interesting. We were talking about clothes. As Hillary Clinton and Mary Harney once said, it's all about the hair, So interestingly, I said, okay, I was obviously trying to come up with strong questions for a big panel I was doing that night. But right in the middle of that, you get reminded of the small challenges that face you as a woman broadcaster. how much did your hair cost and how much do your clothes cost? Out of interest in prime time, it was a great answer. It costs nothing. Everyone in current affairs, you pay your own hair and you buy all your own clothes. So it was a good answer I could give. But the point was different. In other words, if I went on television that night with my hair looking like when I wake up in the morning, it wouldn't go down well. People would call in, literally people would call in and say, what happened to Miriam's hair tonight?
Yeah, for inviting me to Ballybunion for the second year in a row. And I'm really honoured and privileged to be here in your company. And it's great this morning, just at the back, listening to our speakers this morning and the energy in the room and the power in the room. So to say I'm nervous would be something of an understatement.
I just want to say we did a poll on the Irish Times coming up to this conference, and it was asking the question, are there enough roles for women in senior roles for women in media? And just looking at it there, we've had a few hundred respondents and around 70% of people think there aren't. So I think we can say that's a good result. I would like it to be a bit higher. I don't know who's saying there are, because there definitely aren't. So you can go in and have a look at that poll.
Have a really good producer and a really good relationship with that producer. So whether it's a TV programme or a TV programme maybe about scientific research or a travel show, or if it's a radio show about lifestyle and human interest, it looks better and it sounds better because the producer has done all of that work. And I've worked with some excellent producers, and most of them have actually been women, but I think because they're behind the scenes and maybe not all of that glamorous, they're not roles that we know very much about or hear very much about. So I'm delighted to be the guest presenter of this podcast today and this element of the Women in Media in Ballybunion. And I'm very interested to hear about the stories that we have from our panellists.
Have I ever been a subject of discrimination, or do I feel that my gender got in my way of progress? And I said no at the time, and I kind of reflected on it afterwards. And while I don't think I was a subject of discrimination due to that, I do feel that there was definitely unconscious biases at play that probably did delay maybe my progress. And one specific instance of that was that, I was in a company where I was incredibly keen and had kind of worked to a certain level and really wanted to progress and become a producer, and a male producer was hired in, instead of me getting on. And that was really the catalyst for me.
In terms of opportunities that I've had, I kind of don't think that I've been in any way discriminated or had less opportunities as a woman. To be honest, that's my own personal experience. And actually, in terms of mentors and work and that kind of thing, I've had a lot of men who've been extremely helpful, extremely good. Like there's two people in particular who've really helped me in my career and kind of pushed me to go for things when I thought I wasn't ready, and have been very kind of consistent and kind of pushing me forward, and they've both been men. Mm-hmm. Now I've worked with some brilliant women as well, but there has been a lot of help, from those men. And I have also had the experience where some women can be less encouraging of other women, coming along, and I was told by somebody, this other woman says you were too ambitious and whatever, which is fine.
Questions I get asked as a producer, one of the questions I always get asked is, how do you do your job with 3 children? And I'm not sure anybody would ask a male producer that question, but I constantly get asked that question. And I get asked, what do you do, and what's it like to be a mother and a working drama producer? And so then I was thinking about that and thinking, well, what is it like? Because you don't really analyse your own life, you get on with it. And 2 images came to mind, and one was very recently, last Saturday, which was the day of the Iftas. And I'd been nominated for Rebellion, and it was Saturday morning, and I was on my hands and knees cleaning the loo with the marigolds on, practicing my speech, because you have to practice your speech in case you win, which I didn't. But you're on your hands and knees cleaning the loo, saying I'd like to thank the Academy, and I thought, that's what it's like.
Thank Joan and John O'Connor again, because it is their idea. Míle buíochas for having us all here tonight. Thank you. I want to thank Roisin Ingle and the Irish Times for being great and sponsoring. Talking earlier to somebody about what you call 2 women who've been the Deputy Prime Minister of your country. And actually it's worth noting, the 2 most powerful women in the history of Irish politics are in this room tonight, and I'd like to
Mary coming to board this evening.
just to thank Joan and John. Well, Joan and John. For this evening, fantastic evening. And this is the 4th year of the award. It has gone from strength to strength, and we are really proud to be associated with it. We were just talking at the table about what Mary would think about it. I don't know. Anyway, I'm actually not going to announce who it is. I'm going to hand that over. I'm in a room of journalists. I'm looking at them all, who I greatly respect. But I think there's one person in this room as a journalist that we all respect more than everybody else, and that's the person who's going to announce this year's award, Olivia O'Leary.
I'm a good girl. I do my homework. So I wrote a proper speech, and that's what Mary Marr brought to the fight for Irish women's freedom. She brought that big city knowledge. She brought her wider knowledge too of the global struggle and a knowledge of American feminist theorists. And she had that American impatience with guff, as my Uncle Paddy in San Francisco puts it, give me a break. But she also had that wider political view because she was a socialist, she believed in equality for everybody. And Mary lived a modest life, which is what I really liked about her. She enjoyed her life, there was no better party woman, there was no better person to go and have lunch with. But she lived modestly, she didn't dress fancy, she didn't drive a fancy car, she didn't live in a fancy house, and she lived what she believed in. She was an enthusiastic member of the National Union of Journalists all of her life, and she was the first Mother of the Chapel in any media organisation in Ireland. And of course you all know what the Mother of the Chapel is. I don't have to explain to a room full of journalists what the Mother of the Chapel is. And she was voted a member of honour of the NUJ. Like some of us who got old, like me, were made life members, and we were very, very proud. But Mary Marr was made a member of honour of the NUJ by her fellow members. And she's been a member of the Employment Appeal Tribunal since 2001, and she's adjudicating on cases about problems in the workplace every day.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sharon Hutchinson, and I run the website Sportswomen.ie, a website which supports, promotes and reports our female athletes by giving them the much needed media exposure they deserve. Historically, sports journalism has been seen as the poor relation within the media world. However, society takes a huge number of its role models from sporting idolatry, and as such we underestimate the value that sports journalism has in providing role models for our teens and laying the foundation for the next generation of leaders. So our speakers today, I'll introduce them briefly first. We've Fiona Coughlin, former Irish rugby captain, Anne McCarthy, Sport Ireland, Cliona O'Leary, I'll do it in order, we've Emily Glen, co-host of the Fair Game podcast, Cliona O'Leary, Deputy Head of RTÉ TV Sport, and Sue Ronan, Irish soccer manager. Our first speaker.
Hi everybody, I'm delighted to be here, my first time in Ballybunion, beautiful spot, I'm sure I'll be back again. I suppose I've been involved in Irish women's rugby in the national team since 2003, and at the time that was very like the embryonic stages of the game in Ireland, and we weren't really that worried about media attention, we were more worried about getting ourselves together and I suppose what we were producing on the pitch. The first couple of years were tough with a lot of losses but a lot of learning along the way, and we were always progressing, and I think for me that was key. Every year there was progression in what we were doing. The New Zealand game, obviously we won it, which was brilliant, and the whole thing went crazy. Twitter was just unbelievable. I heard we didn't actually get to, I suppose, experience what was going on at home with the papers, being on the front page of the papers, radio, TV covering it, which was huge, and I suppose huge for a part of our journey as well was having all that attention around us. But again, it wasn't for us, it's about those future girls, to get them engaged in the game and get them playing the game. I suppose we eventually bombed out in a World Cup semi-final against England in what was an appalling display of rugby again by us, and one that we weren't used to against England. We were used to losing against them, but we normally played quite well. All of the media coverage after that game was really positive. We got to a World Cup semi-final, well done. But I actually found that quite patronising, because if the men had played in the same manner that we had, they would have been slated. And I think for us to kind of be respected, we needed to be talked about in the exact same way that the men would have been in a game of rugby, and just analysing it as a game of rugby, which it wasn't. I suppose
that would be my gripe with the media. We've had is Cleana O'Leary, Deputy Head of RT TV Sport, and she's a witness to the development of women's sport within the media from being non-existent 20 years ago to today's level of coverage.
Thanks, Sharon, and thanks also to Joan for including sport in this weekend of discussions around the media, because all too often sport can be forgotten about as very much an important part of the media. It's also true to say that the definition of journalist has expanded greatly in recent years. The democratisation of access to means of production and distribution now gives anybody with a passion for storytelling the ability to reach a wide audience without having to rely on traditional publishers or broadcasters. And we see that in the rapidly expanding blogger and podcast universe, which Emily will talk more about later. But the question here today is, can sports journalism be the Trojan horse for real change? I read this as, can exposure for women's sport on all platforms, in whatever form, print, radio or visual, bring change to the landscape of women's sport? And does more coverage bring more interest and more participation? And I think it can. It's important to have role models, the likes of Fiona and Sue, and for young girls growing up, as Sharon mentioned earlier. But it's also really important for sponsorship and for the growth of the game.
We pick a Sportswoman of the Month, and then in December we come together, and of the 12 nominees we pick an overall winner. And that day is one of the fantastic days in the calendar, and I look forward to it because it's a day to step back and celebrate what Irish athletes have done, and more importantly, what our female athletes have done. I'm privileged enough to work in Sport Ireland, and I get to meet some fantastic athletes, and their stories are absolutely amazing. What they do and what they continue to do for our country needs to be celebrated and continues to do so.
Emily is co-host of the podcast Fair Game. It's a fortnightly podcast which focuses on women in sport in Ireland. Emily recently spoke at the Web Summit, inaugural Web Summit, the Web Summit on the topic of women in sport, so it's obviously a subject very close to our heart.
So invite two panellists on, and every fortnight we would deal with one issue for 40 minutes. This has given us an opportunity to talk about some of the issues facing women in sport, but also given us a platform for Irish sportswomen and Irish elite female athletes to promote themselves and their sports. That's pretty important when you think about the limited opportunities for sports fans to get to know their female athletes.
Last but not least, we have Sue Ronan, National Soccer Manager and Head of...
Our Senior Cup final, as Cleana said, is live on TV, however. It's played at the Aviva Stadium as part of a doubleheader with the men's game for the last couple of years, and that's proved to be a huge success. I saw some figures for last year. I can't remember the numbers, Cleana, but I think the viewership peaked for the women's game. What the minimum figure was, if you can understand me, the year before for the men's viewer figures. So certainly it's improving, and it's showing there is interest out there for women's football. Our international matches in the last year, the Setanta have decided to cover all our competitive home games, which is fantastic. They also showed the recent game away to the USA. That was obviously shown live in the USA, and there's a huge crowd, there's huge interest in America, as we know, in women's football. More sponsors are getting interested and getting involved, etc. At Wembley last year, there was 55,000 attended a friendly between England and Germany, and I was actually there myself. It was an awful rainy day. I think they actually sold 55,000 tickets. I think just under 50 actually turned up on the day because of the weather. It was horrific, tube strikes, all the rest. But it was also live on TV. But that's the interest in the game over there, so it's fantastic.
The feedback this year has been fantastic, folks, and the message back is that Women in the Media in Ballybunion is a unique event, and because I think firstly it's in Ballybunion as well, the fact it's been held outside of Dublin, and all you people have decided to take the time out of your busy schedules to come to join it, and we do really appreciate that. We have managed to attract some of the most powerful and inspirational women in both women and politics here. Testament to that this weekend is the fact that we have the only two women who have held the position of Taoiseach in Ballybunion, in Kilcoolies and here today, and they have been fantastic. Just to sit and chat to them over the weekend, and also in their public addresses and whatever. So I really appreciate the fact that Mary Hardy and Joan Burton took the time out to come to us again.
Challenge some of the things that are said. I'm not a fan of people complaining about the way things are. I'm more in the spirit of let's try and change them, because leadership is the responsibility of all of us, and it belongs to those that take it. And when Olivia last night painted the picture of the landscape for women when Mary Marr began as a journalist in Ireland, I'd actually forgotten a lot of that. Sometimes we take for granted the change that has occurred in this small country, and it's been immense. And one of the wonderful things about this weekend is that it gives an opportunity for people from another generation in politics and in the media to meet with an older generation and vice versa. I got the opportunity to meet for the first time Una Mullally. I have never met her before, but during the referendum I was so inspired by her contribution, as many people were. She was absolutely terrific. And you don't get those opportunities except here in Ballybunion. I think it's fantastic, because unlike most conferences where people come, deliver their speech and go, everybody stays around. It's very sociable, it's very relaxed, it's in a holiday spirit, and Joan always manages to deliver the most amazing weather. And so, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to close the 4th annual Women in the Media in Ballybunion. And again, can I just say to you, Joan, you're a true inspiration. She didn't draw breath all weekend, but anyway, it's been a fantastic weekend. Not just the talks and the debate and the camaraderie and the networking, but the fun. And I'm really sorry to have missed the wonderful music last night. And I know it's worth coming here every Saturday night. It's not just during this weekend. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a safe journey home.